Good morning, everyone. This is Krista King Oaks, Youth Services Consultant with the Kentucky Department for Libraries and Archives. Welcome to today's original webinar, Loose Parts Play, presented by Schiavi Erin Nevitt with the Louisville Free Public Library. Just a reminder that all of our trainings, including today's webinar, is supported by funding from the Institute for Museum and Library Services. You will be able to download a copy of today's slides at the end of the presentation, along with completing a survey to let us know about your training experience. I will be available throughout today's training for support and technical assistance. If at any time you have any issues with the audio or the screen, please let me know in the chat. There is also help available in the top toolbar under Audio Wizard Setup. There will be a few opportunities throughout today's webinar to watch interactive videos. A reminder that those videos will be available by clicking on the link on your screen, which will open up onto a new browser separate from the Adobe Connect training screen that we are currently in. We will walk you through those steps and those reminders to how to access those videos when the time is ready. Now I will turn it over to Kate and Erin with the Louisville Free Public Library to begin today's training. Take it away.
All right, thank you. Hi everyone, good morning. Thanks for joining us for this webinar. I'm Kate Schiavi, and I am the Youth Services Manager at the Louisville Free Public Library.
Hi there, good morning. I'm Erin Nevitt, and I am a children's librarian at one of our branch libraries, the Middletown branch.
So we're going to talk today about loose parts play, which is something that both of us really enjoy incorporating into programs. And we did this training for our staff here last year, and then also presented a portion of it at the Youth Services Retreat in October. So this is the first time we're doing it in webinar version. Typically when we do it in person with people, we give them time to play. We usually bring lots of fun stuff for people to kind of experience it for themselves. So unfortunately we don't get that portion of the training. But I hope that you'll be inspired after the webinar to go back and try these things for yourself and share them with your kids. So this is loose parts play, and to start with, I am just going to talk about kind of a definition for loose parts play and put that in perspective a little bit for you. This was a theory that was kind of coined in an article by Simon Nicholson, who was an architect. In 1971, he wrote an article called How Not to Cheat Children, the Theory of Loose Parts Play, and that was in the journal called Landscape Architecture. So if you're looking for that full article, you can find that it was from 1971. So it is a little bit dated at this point, but I did want to read the first kind of opening paragraphs because I think they're pretty powerful in the way that he thinks loose parts really benefits children in their lives. So I'm going to read just the first couple of paragraphs here. Creativity is for the gifted few. The rest of us are compelled to live in environments constructed by the gifted few, listen to the gifted few's music, use gifted few's inventions in art, and read the poems, fantasies, and plays by the gifted few. This is what our education and cultural conditions us to believe, and this is a culturally induced and perpetuated lie. Building upon this lie, the dominant cultural elite tell us that the planning, design, and building of any part of the environment is so difficult and so special that only the gifted few, those with degrees and certificates in planning, engineering, architecture, art, education, behavioral psychology, and so on, can properly solve environmental problems. The result is that the vast majority of people are not allowed, or worse, feel that they are incompetent to experiment with the components of building and construction, whether in environmental studies, the abstract arts, literature, or science. The creativity, the playing around with the components and variables of the world in order to make experiments and discover new things and form new concepts, has been explicitly stated as the domain of the creative few, and the rest of the community has been deprived of a crucial part of their lives and lifestyle. This is particularly true of young children who find the world incredibly restricted, a world where they cannot play with building and making things, or play with fluids, water, fire, or living objects, and all the things that satisfy one's curiosity and give us the pleasure that results from discovery and invention. So he goes on to talk about his theory of loose parts play, which is basically an idea that learning is very much play-based, and that loose parts are part of that. And by definition, loose parts are any objects that are in a child's environment that have no specific set of directions. So they can be manipulated or adapted, and they encourage open-ended learning and creativity. So basically, loose parts play can be anything that kids can move. They can find in their environment. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So loose parts play in the classroom. You may have seen or heard of loose parts play. A lot of Montessori classrooms will use loose parts, Reggio Emilia classrooms, Waldorf classrooms, and then any kind of nature-based or outdoor classrooms will have this element of loose parts play. But really, you can do loose parts play anywhere, and we think, because we're librarians and we love this, that the library is the perfect place to do that as well. So loose parts, they have just different functions. So they can be manipulated, designed, created. They're movable, so they don't stay in one space all the time. They can be moved from one environment to a different environment. So you can have loose parts play that you use indoors, and you can take them outdoors and use them in different ways. They're inclusive to all learning abilities. There's no wrong way to play with them, and it's all children-led play. So anything that kids can pick up and do for themselves is part of loose parts. So here I've just included the developmental domain visual that you may be familiar with. These are the domains that the different skills that kids need to be ready for school. And so you've got the 5 different domains here, and I've just included ideas for how loose parts play can help with all of these different skills that kids need to develop. So for general knowledge and mathematics, loose parts helps with critical thinking. Kids are thinking about numbers, they're classifying things, they're experimenting with spatial relationships, and they're definitely solving different kind of problems that they may have. Health and physical well-being. There's lots of gross motor and fine motor skills and hand-eye coordination that go into playing with different parts. And then for social and emotional development, this definitely brings in inclusiveness, kids working together, kids learning how to take risks and how to make decisions about different things. Language and communication development. There's lots of discussion when kids are playing together in this sort of environment. They're using their imagination to create different situations. They're talking to each other. So there's lots of vocabulary being exchanged and discussion being exchanged. And then for self-help, organization of materials. And so there is a level of organization to loose parts play in putting things away, taking things out, sorting things back into different compartments. So all of that is helping with these developmental domains that kids need to build those skills for school. So I wanted to mention that.
Okay, so this is Erin Nevitt jumping in now on our presentation, and I am going to talk about, first of all, starting with the 7 types of loose parts materials. There's sort of a general category for each type. And these were found, first of all, there's several resources that we're going to show at the end of the presentation, but a lot of the research and where a lot of these materials were developed and came from comes from a set of books called Loose Parts, Inspiring Play in Young Children. And there's 3 different volumes now of the books. They were written by Lisa Daly and Miriam Bologowski. Yes. And that will be at the end of the presentation so you can get their names exactly. So, and there's also an ebook that is out there that these 7 types were collected in. It's called Loose Parts, a Startup Guide. And it is a free downloadable ebook from fairydustteaching.com, a blog, that we will have an access link to that as well. So the 7 main types, you can think of your loose parts as being categorized in these 7 ways. There's wood, metal, plastic, ceramic glass, fabric and ribbon, paper packaging, and nature-based. And of course, anything that you might collect for loose parts could be categorized mainly into these 7 types. But, you know, you could also find something that may not necessarily fit into those 7 types. But that kind of just gives you an idea of where to gather things from when you're thinking about collecting and starting to, you know, devise your plan for how you're going to collect your items and what you're going to, you know, use. So the first slide here is nature-based, and you can see a wide range of options here. I don't necessarily have to read them all for you, but the main things are sticks and rocks, dried flowers, leaves. Those are the main things that you're going to be able to find readily in your environments, outside. You know, one thing you could do if you just wanted to start this program off for the first time is have a nature-based led activity outside your library and let the children collect some nature-based pieces, and they will have their own loose parts right there. Acorns are fun, anything, you know, flowers, any kinds of pieces of wood, chips, mulch, moss, you know, dirt and sand, obviously. Those are all great choices for nature-based. But as you can see, you're going to have access to all the slides at the end, and you can print this. I'm not going to read every single one. So in the category of wood, it's wood reuse. You know, you can use things like corks, wooden beads, dowels, you know, pieces of, think of, you know, if you have old chairs and you have the legs off of a chair, or your wood napkin rings, you know, anything, spools from thread, any old puzzle pieces, you know, especially in my library, I know pieces get lost, especially those wood puzzles are great. So just reuse those things. A lot of this is reusing, recycling, and we'll get into later about how to collect it, how to get enough of it so you feel like you have enough for your audience, getting your staff involved to help you, you know, help collect. And but it's great because you're reusing things, and instead of just throwing something that's going to sit in the landfill, you can reuse it for a very creative and special activity that's incorporating all these great aspects that we've talked about into your story time. So that is some examples of the wood category. And then plastic. So you can use anything, you know, anything you can think of. Plastic is going to be probably the easiest one that you could just recycle old, you know, plastic containers, yogurt containers, your sour cream, anything with a lid, sour cream container, your milk jugs, your juice jugs, anything like that. You know, the thing about straws now, Nobody wants plastic straws out there anymore. Well, we have a whole bag of plastic straws, and we just use them in our, we're not throwing them away, we're using them. So you can collect those from people. Buttons, popsicle sticks, lollipop sticks, anything like that. And this list could go on and on. This is just an example to get you started. Those old CDs, we use those a lot. If you have audiobooks that have been withdrawn and you take the old, CDs from those, I use those all the time in my loose parts when we do, I just did a faces one that you'll see some pictures of here in a minute, and those work great for making faces and using that for them to manipulate and make a face onto the CD and use that as the background. So there's lots of ways to just reuse things. The next category that they mention is metal. So you can have, all kinds of things here that are listed on this list. Old keys are great. Old utensils, forks and spoons, serving spoons that maybe you don't use anymore, or you find in places that we're going to talk about where you can collect things and places where you can find a lot of things to get you started. But there's, cans are great, metal cans that you just rinse out and reuse from your canned foods and things like that. Any kind of old gadget that you're not using anymore, you can find a new use for just about anything with this loose parts idea. The next category is ceramic and glass. So here you can see glass beads are very popular, marbles, gems, anything like I already talked about with the CDs. It mentioned small mirror discs, doorknobs. If you're redoing something in your house or somebody who is, get all of the parts from your cabinets and your drawers and use those door handles, the little handles that come off of things in your house. You can reuse those. So that's just some examples of the ceramic and glass. And then with fabric, yarn, and ribbon, that's pretty self-explanatory, but here's some ideas. Maybe you have a scrap pile of all your felt pieces that are just scraps. Use those. Anything, scarves, that tool that you can find, that's what we use a lot for our scarves, and you can just cut that into pieces. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to buy, special scarves from an online site or anything. You can just use pieces of fabric. And there are ways to go out in the community and get donations and things from places that might give you scraps and pieces of things that they're not using. And we'll talk about in a little bit. So those are some great examples. And then, of course, we have packaging. So this comes into like your packing peanuts, your bubble wrap, boxes, things that that you might use to ship items with. Any kind of box that you can recycle, a cereal box, a cracker box, frozen meal box, anything like that. We use egg cartons, and especially the foam things that you have a hard time recycling and they're not good for the environment. You can just save those and use them for this loose parts play, things like that. Of course, toilet paper tubes, paper towel rolls, all that sort of thing would fall in here.
Okay, so we're going to try this. We have this link to a video here that we would like you to click on and watch the video. It's about 3 minutes long, and while you're watching the video, just kind of observe what is happening, listen to what is happening, and then when you are finished watching the video, come back in the chat box and write one thing that you noticed there from the video.
This is Krista. Just a reminder, as Kate has mentioned, click on the Vimeo link on your screen, it will automatically open the video into a new browser, and you'll want to scroll down until you see the play bar and click play to watch the video. Again, it's just slightly over 3 minutes. Let us know in the chat when you are back, and we will resume when the majority of attendees have returned to the training screen. Thank you.
Okay, so we just finished watching the video, so as folks finish up, go ahead and share your observations there in the chat box. So much conversation, yes, that's one of the great things I love about this video is you can hear the teacher asking questions, you can hear the kids kind of chit-chatting about what's happening. All the kids were making something different, exactly. There was no direction about what they were supposed to be making. So you had the one little girl who was very meticulous about covering her, what are those, sugar gums? Her little, covering them in clay, and lots of clay, and then going back for more. So she was kind of doing her own thing, and we saw one little boy stringing the pony beads. So you see lots of different tools that are available to them, lots of things with different textures somebody mentioned, exactly. Yep, the adults had running commentary. They were talking to the children, asking them about what they're doing. You saw a little bit when the little girl wanted to go back and get some more clay, she kind of did a little a side check to the boy, so you kind of see a little bit of interaction in that way too. So yeah, so thanks for your comments about that. I really like that video because I think it shows perfectly what the loose parts really does. So we're going to go ahead and move on. Sharp tools, yeah, Chris. It's a great way to teach kids how to be safe with things like that. You know, we have lots of storytime families who don't even want to give their kids scissors, which is crazy, but it gives them the opportunity to interact with those things and learn how to interact in the correct way with those things. So, all right, so I'm going to move on and talk about block play for the next couple of slides, just because to me block play kind of seems like the very basic loose parts. You know, lots of people have blocks. You can make blocks out of, you know, small cardboard boxes. You know, so blocks to me seems like the one thing that is very accessible for everyone. So these are some things that I found on the NACI website that they had asked some early childhood experts, you know, what are the kinds of things that block play does for kids? And so they identified these different things: problem solving, imagination, self-expression, mathematics, continuity and permanence, creativity, science, self-esteem, and social-emotional growth. So I'm just going to run through those real quick. For problem solving, you know, kids come into, they see blocks that may be different shapes and sizes. They may be all the same shape and size, and they just kind of look at those and say, you know, what do I want to build? Or if they are building something, like, how do I make this higher? Or if I want to build a bridge, what kind of pieces do I need next? So there's lots of different problem solving involved with block play. Imagination, you know, kids can build whatever they're envisioning in their minds. If they have different blocks of shape sizes, they can, you know, build many different things. And even if all the blocks are the same shape and size, they, you know, can use them in different ways to create different things that they're imagining. Self-expression, it allows kids to express themselves and demonstrate, you know, what they have in their minds. You can have kids who speak different languages sit down at the block pit and interact with each other, where words may not be a way that they can communicate through their play instead. Mathematics, there's lots of mathematics involved in block play: estimation, comparison, measurements, length, symmetry, and balance. So all of that is involved with math. Continuity and permanence. You definitely have the kids who like to build these things up and then knock them down right away. You have some kids who like to build things up and then have them stay there for a while so that they can, you know, either go back and look at it or show their friends. You know, so they learn those two concepts through block play as well. Creativity, you know, they can use different blocks or different materials to make all kinds of different things. Science, there's a lot of hypothesizing that kids can do with block play. Like, what if I put this block here, what's going to happen, or what do I think is going to happen? And then they can test out their reasoning and see the results. Self-esteem, you know, kids just love to create things on their own and show their friends and show the grown-ups in their lives. And it's something that they have created that's completely unique to them. And then they also love the chance to get to demolish that too. Mm-hmm. So that's a big part of block play too, is that, you know, they have that feeling of ownership, and that, you know, they can knock it down and turn around and create something completely new too. And then social emotional growth, you know, block play with a group of children. Kids are often taking turns, they're sharing materials, they're, you know, relying on each other a little bit. They're showing ways to cooperate with each other and develop self-esteem. And then there are different like developmental stages of block play, and this is from that blog fairydustteaching.com that's in our resource slide. But she outlines these different developmental stages of block play, which I really like. So stage 1 is for our younger kids, 2 to 3-year-olds, where they're just kind of picking up blocks or things that are block shaped, and they're carrying them around with them. So that's for the 2 to 3-year-olds. So they might, pick them up from one place and carry them to another place, but they're not necessarily doing a whole lot of building yet with the blocks. So stage 2 is around 3 years old where they start to build. And for this stage, it's mostly things that are just kind of flat, either vertically or horizontally going up. So that would be for about 3-year-olds. And this picture kind of shows you that they're, building all mostly in one way, going across or going up. And then for stage 3, they start with what's called bridging. So they're connecting 2 blocks with a space between with a 3rd block. So they're having to do a little bit of experimenting with balance and how things kind of fit together to build bridging. And then for stage 5, or stage 4, I'm sorry, they're going to start to build enclosures. And so you see here, it looks like maybe that's a little farm enclosure. There's some animals in there. So kids are finally, or not finally, but they're experimenting with kind of concepts of inside and outside. So they're building different kinds of, you might have like a house. They might be building a house with dolls inside. But it kind of gets to kids seeing these things as a more technical structure. And then for stage 5 is representational building. So 4- and 5-year-olds will do this where they'll start to build things that represent things. So they might build a castle, or they might build a skyscraper. And so you'll start to see more of that as the kids get older. They might start to name things, come up with a name for their building. And this is great for dramatic play if they're doing that as well. And then stage 6 is 5 and up, more complex building. So they'll be building things, that have more elements to it. They might incorporate different toys into the structures as well. And I think, I say 5 and up here. I have a 10-year-old who still loves to play with blocks. So, I think that kids will play with blocks as long as they find them interesting. And so I think the more that they do that and the more kinds of interesting materials you incorporate in that, it kind of helps keep their attention too. So we are going to show you some examples in action. Erin is going to talk about some of the loose parts play she's used in her programming.
Hi again. So just to start out with I'm going to show a bunch of slides that are just going to have examples of photos. Some of the photos were taken at a conference session that I attended, and this all sort of started for me when I attended that conference session at the Early Childhood Institute that was here in Louisville last year. So that's kind of where it started, and the presenters there were from the Redwood Cooperative School in Lexington, and that's kind of where this all jump-started for me. So you're going to see a lot of slides with photos that they had at their conference, and then they're going to jump into things that I have done at my branch and a couple other staff members have done here at the Louisville Free Public Library here in Louisville. So I wanted to show you ideas of sort of how this can play out in a story time session, because it's been done, I've done it, I have the experience of doing it, and sort of what you can do with that. And as we go through, we'll kind of talk about, so in the first slide that I just jumped away from, you can see there was a pizza idea. The first picture is like a pizza story time or a pizza loose parts, and I did this as well at my branch. So you can use different trays like that. You can find those at the dollar store. I'm going to jump up. A lot of things I'll be talking about will give you ideas of where to find things, where you can collect things from. So dollar store is a good place to start. You can get those kind of trays like that. Those are like serving trays for vegetables or fruit, and put all your loose parts into each section. So there, that first picture is doing a pizza sort of one. The second one is doing creepy carrots. So you've got your beans or the green rice.
No, they're lentils.
Lentils, yes. But you can use rice. You can dye the rice. You can use the green lentils or beans. Get some big, containers to put them in. And then I think this particular staff member had these little carrots that she bought from somewhere. She's no longer with us anymore, but she's amazing. These are her photos. She's now up in Indiana at a library. But she did creepy carrots in that one. And then the third picture is just box play and using those paper materials that we talked about. So that's an example there in the third picture. This next one,
this was a bird story time that she did.
Bird story time.
Yeah, so she's got bird seed in the one tote there, and she had created this funnel-like thing that you see in the first picture that she uses for a lot of story time. So she'll bring that out with different things that the kids can funnel through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's some good examples there, and you'll be able to look back and see those. So this is the first one I did at my branch. I read the 3 pigs, and I basically read the story. This is when I first decided to do this after I'd gone to the conference. And I read one book, and then we went right into our loose parts play. So I had sticks, and I had pipe cleaners for, the house made of sticks. I had the shredded paper for the house made of straw, and I had Lego bricks for the brick houses. And I did separate the red Legos, for red houses, for the brick houses. But basically, I put them in containers on the table. The parents and caregivers and I had some bigger Lego blocks, but the parents and caregivers just went and started playing. And like we've already talked about, these are things they move, they manipulate on their own, they control on their own, they change while they play. So it's basically you just give a basic instruction of we're done with our story, here's our closing song, and now we're going to do loose parts. And I am not giving you any directions on what you're going to do. You're just going to play with your child and let it be child-led. And you don't even have to explain that, because when the children go and find the parts, they don't need any instruction because they're children. They don't need that. I think as adults and parents especially step in and think, well, we need to have some kind of direction. What are we supposed to do? And there is no direction. That's the whole joy and beauty of it. So these are some more examples of items you can use. That's, paper, parts again. You can use muffin trays to store your parts in. Here's buttons and beads and cotton balls. You're making snowmen in that one. There's shells. There's the shredded paper again. There's the magnetic tiles that you can use with the pieces from mason jars and the metal. So you can see the different types that we talked about, the 7 types. There's some sticks in a container. There's some rocks and gems. And on a placemat, I use placemats a lot. Here's Leaf Man as an example, where you can, put those items out and let them create their own Leaf Man or Leaf Woman. Jars with the different things, buttons again, the little sticky burrs, the yarn, pipe cleaners. These are things you can find, in a dollar store, at a Goodwill. Like I said, ask people around you, ask your staff if they have things that they're getting rid of. These are examples of faces that we made when we went to the conference. We just got to play, and we went around each table and experimented. So, you have some wood pieces, some blocks. There's some homemade Play-Doh when they were making snowmen. And there's the CDs that you can make with faces. Here's stick and stone as an example. Put a metal tray out, some stones and sticks, and some gems, and you can, have loose parts and recreate the story. Feathers, popsicle sticks again, clothespins. So these are all some beautiful examples This is going into one I did recently where we did faces. We had a story time about being unique and being ourselves and loving ourselves. And we talked about self-esteem and uniqueness and who we are as an individual, but we also talked about, yes, we're all different, but we're also all the same because we're the human race. And we bring in this brings in a lot of, vocabulary words that 2-year-olds probably not hear. Talking about being a human and how we're all the same. We're different, but we're the same. We look different, but we're all the same. So this was a beautiful one that I did. And you can see I used cookie cutters. This picture on the left I loved because the boy was making a face and then he decided to make spaghetti. And he was just using anything that was on the table. So these are the examples of what children made. I also put out dry erase markers and just pieces of laminated old posters that they could draw and erase, and they could make a self-portrait. So that was really inspiring for children to just draw themselves. So these are just more examples. I mean, I put anything out. In this particular one, I gathered things just from my storage area, back room. We had the Play-Doh out. And styrofoam balls is another example of something. Yarn. Save your corks from your wine bottles. So now we're going to just briefly talk about how to organize all of that.
Right. So there's a lot of stuff. So when you're thinking about how much of this you can take on, definitely think about your space. These are some ideas for organization. You see the kind of clear glass, like mason jar type jars up there are great because you can see what's inside and you can put lids on things. So that's a great way to organize. I save lots of like yogurt containers and sushi trays. If you get to take out sushi a lot, they have little great trays that it comes on. Tofu containers, we have a patron who brings those to us. So any kind of like takeout food that you think you could reuse for organizing and containing all these things is a good idea. The muffin tins you'll see there, that's a great way to put things out on the table because you have already little compartments for things. So just kind of think about that as you're getting into this, about how it's all going to be organized and how you can store things so that you know where everything is. Do you want to talk about this real quick?
So this is a handout that will be available as a PDF attachment. I think we'll send some things to Krista. We have some book lists and other things, but this is actually a planning form that they provided us at the conference, and I've been using it. We use it in our training here with our staff. So to sort of just get you started on, number one, it asks you what you want to, use to inspire your loose parts station. So I decided to think of a book. So think of a book title that you want to use. For example, The Three Pigs. Or I used at the training, I did Box Meets Circle. So I just started with a book that I might want to use. And then in here, this little chart, you can identify 3 to 5 loose parts that you'll pull together for that loose part station. And so in thinking about that book, I thought about boxes of all sizes, recycled boxes, various balls, balloons that were blown up, circular rocks, wooden blocks, plastic lids off recycled containers, so anything that would be a shape of a box or a square or a circle or a sphere. And then what are some reasons you chose these loose parts? So you think of what are you trying to accomplish with your loose parts that day. If it's your very first time trying this, what do you want to, accomplish? So, and with those loose parts, I chose them because of their shapes. They're free. They're easy to collect. And I wanted the children to be able to take a box and circle home and retell the story themselves. That's another thing I do occasionally if you have enough pieces to let them take something home from the loose parts so they can, and it can spark more imagination at home. So this is just a handout that you're going to be able to use sort of in your planning stages. And number 4, how are you going to record observations? I mean, that's more for maybe in a teaching early childhood environment, but I was just looking for ways to incorporate more play literacy into my story times and wanted to start using a book tie-in with loose parts play. So that was my reason for that. And then how will your observations influence future planning, or, what you're going to do in your story times. So you can jump off from, your first one, and they'll start taking off. Once you do one and get comfortable with it and get your parents and caregivers in on it, it's going to take off, because every one that I've done, the parents have loved and enjoyed, and the children they just have a blast. So that's just a resource tool for you to use.
So we are going to try and wrap this up in the next 5 minutes, so there's time for questions at the end. So the next couple of slides we're going to breeze through. But things to consider, which I think is important, pay attention to choking hazards. As you've seen in some of these pictures, some of these materials might be quite small. And so if you know that you have kiddos in your group that are likely to put things in their mouth, I wouldn't say make it completely unavailable, but definitely give parents and caregivers a heads up so that they could either steer their child clear of those things, or they could ask you, please don't bring those out. So just have a conversation about that. Be ready to prep parents for something new. So if they come in and they're used to, an after story time craft where there's, maybe some pre-cut materials that they glue together, and this might be something that's completely new to them or out of left field, you want to kind of give them a heads up just so that they know what to expect, and they know that it's going to be children-led so that they can let their kids kind of do their own thing. It just kind of gives parents the tools that they'll need to try this new, because it's going to be new for them too. Nature-based elements may have a shelf life, so you may be collecting all these wonderful things, and then you pull them out months from now and they may be moldy, or they may have lots of insects crawling on them. So just be aware of that. There are ways to either bake some of these things for a long time at very low temperatures, so that whatever might be crawling around inside them dies off. So there's ways of preserving things, so just be aware of that. Be aware of your space and storage. I know lots of librarians who love to just take everything and store it, but we don't have a whole lot of room everywhere, so be aware of that. And then loose parts is a great way for building cultural competencies and connections. You don't need to speak the same language to play, and so it's a great opportunity if you have populations that speak different languages that don't always communicate with each other, to introduce this as a way of leveling the playing field for everyone. So I'm going to skip these. They're just kind of before and after pictures, but basically, this is the background or backyard playground of this family that they kind of just went all out. They had a lot of plastic slides and climbing things there, and then they just got rid of it all and introduced a whole lot of loose parts, so you can see what that looks like. And then this real quick is just like a discussion that I had with the group when I did this about, what is the difference between handing out a coloring sheet of this ice cream cone and asking kids to color it versus giving them this very inviting opportunity to play here with different ice cream toppings and scoops and different things that you can do with that ice cream. So it's just kind of to show the difference between the two. So these next couple of slides, this is information about an outdoor preschool that just opened this year in Louisville, or it's in Goshen, Kentucky. But there's a link there to their school video, so if you're interested in seeing how that works, it's all nature-based, it's completely outdoors, pretty cool concept. We're excited to have that in the neighborhood. And here's some more examples of nature-based learning environments that you can click through to see. And here's resources. So the Fairy Dust Teaching blog, she's got a great blog, and you can sign up for updates that come to your email once a week. And then the Loose Parts books and Pinterest, of course. There's all kinds of wonderful ideas that you can find in Pinterest, as you all know. So that is the end of our presentation, and we're going to go ahead and open up for questions.
All right, a huge thank you to both Kate and Erin for a fantastic training. That seemed like the fastest hour on a webinar that I've experienced in quite some time. Please go ahead, and as thoughts are coming to you, resources you might want to share, questions you might have for Erin, Kate, or myself, please go ahead and enter those into the chat right now. While you all are thinking of concepts, I just have up Erin and Kate's contact information, and we'll come back to that. But I do want to go ahead and point out a few resources we have on this topic available through the state library. As part of KDLA School Ready Libraries grant that wrapped up last spring, we did give out sets of professional texts for every library in the state. And the book that you see on your screen, Loose Parts, Inspiring Play in Young Children, was part of that collection. However, we do have this book available for checkout through KDLA. We are also adding the rest of the collection into our library. But you can see there are lots of other similar parallel texts that you might be able to use to inspire and incorporate Loose Parts Play and other new ideas into your early childhood programming. So if you visit the catalog on KDLA's website, here are just some recommendations for keywords and subject searches to make. You can search Loose Parts Play, early childhood education or activities and programs, or children's library activity programs. And again, you can access the catalog for the state library by simply going to kdla.ky.gov. And of course, you can always find out about the latest resources when they are available from the state library, as well as new webinars, in-person trainings, and so much more by joining the Kayak Lister, that stands for Kentucky Youth and Children. It is a listserv devoted to those who work in libraries with children and teens, and it is a two-way communication tool. I always like to remind people it's not simply those of us at KDLA pushing information one way. We welcome you to invite discussion on various topics that are of interest to you, or if you have questions about anything you're planning in your library, especially with summer reading coming up. If you want to send a message to the list, simply send an email to kayak.listserv.ky.gov, and you can get instructions for that, or how to simply join the list if you are not already a member by emailing me. As a reminder, I do send out a weekly digest, usually on Fridays. Those are the first places you'll hear about trainings, resources, as well as the trending topics and news in library world. Those are always available in archive format on KDLA's Youth Services website, as well as our announcements about our various resources. We also have a page dedicated completely to summer reading support with information about the Collaborative Summer Library Program, state partnerships, as well as all trainings related to summer reading, such as the KDLA Youth Services Retreat that Kate mentioned at the beginning of the webinar. As always, you can find out about upcoming trainings. We'll have one more at the beginning of May on family and intergenerational programs before we take a break for summer reading. To access that, visit KDLA's continuing education calendar. And as a reminder, today's webinar was recorded and an archive will be made available within a week, as well as a certificate of your attendance and other materials and handouts. As always, this webinar and all training provided by KDLA is made possible in part by funding from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. You can follow KDLA on social media. We are on Facebook at KDLA Library Development and on Twitter at KDLA Live Dev. That's KDLA LIVDEV. I want to once again thank Kate and Erin at the Louisville Free Public Library. You can access a copy of the slides in today's training in the slide box at the bottom left-hand portion of the screen. We would also greatly appreciate if each of you would take the time to complete a brief survey. You can click on the highlighted link and click Browse To in the pod that says IMLS Survey. Also, if you are listening to the recording, you too are eligible to take the survey. Myself and the presenters will stick on the line for the next 5 minutes to take any closing questions and or comments, but I will go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you again for attending a webinar with the Kentucky Department for Libraries and Archives. Have a great day.